The Metro on 1019 WDET-FM. I'm Tia Graham. As Detroit's mayoral race begins to take shape, residents will have to decide which candidates will address the issues most important to them. We brought you conversations with a few of the candidates, and we will continue to do so as the race progresses. The candidates have outlined the issues they believe will improve the lives of Detroit residents. But what do residents and community leaders believe needs to be addressed by the next mayor? Our next guest will help shed a light on some of them. Cindy Gamboa is the executive director of Mi Poder, a non-profit civic organization that services Michigan's Latino population. Cindy, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, Tia. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course. Thanks for being here. Now, Cindy, you've been active in the community in Detroit, having previously worked with the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. Talk about how that work informs the statewide work you are doing now with Mi Poder.
Absolutely, Tia. I've been an organizer before organizing was cool, before I even realized that I was organizing. And I had the privilege to work in Detroit and do organizing around immigration justice, environmental justice, and around education for about 7 years to make sure that we were raising the issues that were impacting our community. And what we noticed was that a lot of the issues really, they weren't unique to Detroit, and we really needed to start. In order to start building real political power, we needed to take it to a statewide level and start unifying our voices with the higher density communities across the state. So that was the impetus for actually building out Mi Poder and making sure that we have a strong unified voice and continue to build that political power for Latinos across the state of Michigan that we know that we need.
Yeah. So, Cindy, just speaking about the Latino population, it's about 8% in Detroit and 6%
Absolutely.
in the state of Michigan, according to the 2024 census estimates. And one thing that I love to hit on there is that oftentimes I think about Detroit, I'm a Black woman, so I talk about Black Detroit, but Detroiters in Southwest are just as much as Detroit as I am. So how do you plan to make a political impact advocating for a small portion of residents?
Yeah. And that a lot of the issues that we care about, that we need, are not unique to just Latinos. They're unique to Detroiters.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to start off there and say, for the Latino community, a lot of the things that we're advocating for are things that we need in our community and that we share with, our African brothers and sisters and with, others kind of in our community. So Southwest Detroit, for example, is very diverse. We have a huge, population of immigrants from various regions, but then also, African Americans, white folks, and really the issues impacting us are shared amongst our community. And we really work to elevate those.
And Cindy, what are you advocating for right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, some of those things, some of them are the tabletop issues that, we all care about. The economy has hit us hard. There's a lot of people out here struggling. So, looking for good paying jobs, rent prices are often crippling our community members. So making sure that we have rent controls, that we, have health insurance and ways to maintain ourselves healthy, right? Are some of the issues that we're hearing over and over again from our neighbors, from our voters when we're out, knocking on doors, canvassing, ensuring that people are getting involved civically. That's what they're telling us that they care about. Some of the other things that, we know that we're lacking as a city are some of the responses to, for example, language access. We haven't been done the greatest with ensuring that folks that don't speak English are well informed or know how to access city services or how to stay engaged with our city.
And Cindy, that was going to be one of my questions as well. Follow-up questions is the lack of access to different languages in terms of things that we see maybe within voting or pamphlets or just information in general. Can you talk about how much that, if that is a barrier, or how much of a barrier that is?
Yeah, it's a huge barrier. Sometimes, I mean, if you don't have the language, if English is not your first language, you have an added barrier
Mm.
to really understand the system, right? And it really is complex. If it's your first time voting and you're really trying to figure it out, even for, a native English speaker, that
Yes,
process
yes.
itself can be intimidating. But if you add the extra layer of, adding, that language barrier, not really understanding it, or not having someone to be able to speak about this in your own language, really, puts a whole portion of our population in the dark as far as like should they get engaged or not, because that's that added work that they have to go through.
Mm.
And sometimes, culturally, we also have this, unspoken word of like, politics isn't for me, and I'm just not going to engage, right? So we're up against that barrier as well, and we are trying to break that down and make sure that people know it is accessible and we do need your voice heard. And there are ways to go around that.
Now, Cindy, voter turnout in Detroit is low. We know it's been low. Around
Mhm.
18% of registered voters cast ballots in the last mayoral election. Other Midwestern cities like St. Louis and Chicago reach turnout numbers above 20% in mayoral elections. Why do you think voters don't turn out to vote?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we are up against every election. It's hard to continue to tell people like this is the most important election of your lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And people, continue to go out and try their best, but people are losing faith in our democracy, right? And there's a huge voter apathy that we're working against, because sometimes it's hard to see that change immediately. And I think that's what people might think of, with one election cycle, the next elected that's coming into office should immediately have these, improvements in my community. But over decades, when we're not seeing that improvement in our communities, then people start to like lose trust, and it's really hard to keep people engaged and really, emphasize that their vote matters. Like they need to see that return on investment
Mm.
consistently. And sometimes, when the investment is happening in places like downtown Detroit and all of the other areas, our neighborhoods like Southwest Detroit, the east side of Detroit, like other areas are not getting invested in, people start to lose trust.
You're listening to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. My guest is Cindy Gamboa. She is the executive director of Me Poder, which is a nonprofit organization that services Michigan's Latino population. Now, Cindy, how do you plan to mobilize a community that doesn't feel seen by the political system? As you're talking right now, there's tons of apathy right now. I can hear it from the young folk around me. Some of them just feel as if it does not matter if their voice, if they, cast their ballot or not, or whatever it may be. So how do we mobilize?
The way we have to do it is really connected to the issues that matter most to them. When people start to realize how voting will directly impact their day-to-day life, and really understand that the folks that they're electing have direct, power to do something about it, then people are gonna be able to see the power in the vote,
Mm.
right? But until people don't have that connection or be able to make the connection, if they don't have a trusted messenger in their community that's saying, I'm voting and this is why, we're not building it. We're not, doing it, our community service by having, these sort of conversations. So that's really what we are trying to do, is make those connections about why the next mayor has to really, understand what it is that Southwest Detroit cares about. We have an upcoming event, next month on July 19th, where we have what we call State of Southwest Detroit. It's a mayoral candidate forum where we will be able to showcase the issues that matter most to Southwest Detroit residents.
Mm.
And we're pushing for real accountability from the next mayor. The next mayor will be able to hear those issues and respond to what role they feel they're going to play to be able to make improvements to Southwest Detroit residents.
And in this election, the issues that have generally come to the forefront are public safety, education, and gentrification. Is that an
Absolutely.
accurate depiction of the issue that we should be highlighting right now?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's what we're hearing, when people can't afford to live in their community, it's a problem when there isn't a strong, safe, environment for our community. That's a problem. Right now with the immigration crisis, there's extra, heightened, fears about who's gonna stay in our community and what our community is going to look like. And really, how do we safeguard our community residents that are most at risk is, something that's front and center to folks living in Southwest Detroit.
Cindy, now let's shift to your recent trip to Lansing. You were there yesterday for a Latino
Yes.
Legislative Advocacy Day. What were you advocating for yesterday?
Oh, it fills my heart to have seen, just a room full of people, from
Yeah.
across the state, from the UP, from to the west side of the state, east side of the state, all talking about very similar issues. We spoke about, strengthening our education system for our children. We spoke about health equity and how do we safeguard the health of our residents, especially with all the chatter about, cuts to Medicaid and access to that, how is it that state officials are going to safeguard our health? And also immigration justice. What are we doing to be able to protect the most vulnerable in our community from the attacks on our immigrant communities, the deportation raids, but also things like how do we ensure that Michigan is truly a welcoming city to immigrants? How are we addressing language barriers, access to essential services like legal aid, ESL classes, and other things that we know that we need in order for our residents to really prosper in our state.
Yes. And under right now, Cindy, immigration policies have been emphasized under President Trump's administration. At the very least, it has sowed confusion, uncertainty, fear among immigrant communities. How might this be best addressed by local leaders?
Local leaders have more control than we think. It's really hard to drown out all of the negative anti-immigrant, narrative that's being fed to us in various forms, social media, but local officials can really put policies and practice in place to safeguard our communities. For example, ensuring that local like law enforcement doesn't engage in 287G agreements that will allow them to cooperate with ICE officials. Essentially, using local services and local resources to draw out this, deportation, the crucial, um, this deportation agenda that the
Yeah.
current administration has that's really breaking apart families.
And our last question to you, Cindy, before we let you go, what about Latino voters who might not live in the Metro Detroit region right now? Like you work throughout the entire state. What issues come to mind as we look toward the governors as well as the U.S. Senate races next year?
Yeah, no, we are really thinking about, we're continuing to organize across the state because the work that we're doing and the issues that we're speaking of have to be community driven. Like I said, we have to make connections with what really matters to the voters on a local matter. What's happening in Detroit, the issues that are coming up in Detroit might not be what they're focused on in Holland, Michigan, or in Kalamazoo, right? We have a really large farm worker population. So, really thinking about our state leaders being making sure that they're uplifting the needs of our communities across the state from rural areas to urban areas, and ensuring that there's protections in place, that there's investments in our community infrastructures like our schools, like our legal aid programs, like our cities that have these higher density communities that need extra support and resources.
Cindy Gamboa is the executive director of Mi Poder, which is a nonprofit organization that services Michigan's Latino population. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much, Tia. It was a great pleasure.
The Metro is produced by Sam Corey Carey Jr. II and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender, and our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University, and it's hosted by Robin Vincent and myself, Tia Graham. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Have a good day.